So hello everybody. Thanks for joining this first common session between the AAM and museumexpert.org. We are very excited about this opportunity that we have to partner together with the AAM to offer this first session. Uh, we we all know how much the COVID pandemic has impacted our field and still will in the near future. A lot of people need to think about how they have to in the field to get new jobs or uh, and this is an opportunity to go and directly to the tools that have been developed over time by AAM to help you do that. This is the first of a series of webinars that we will add to what Museum Expert already offers, which is the connection between potential employers. But we think that there is so much more that we can do. And so this is a first. So today we have, this Catherine McNamee, who is the Director for Human Resources at AAM, as well as Ryan Burke, who is the Director for Membership, who will, for half an hour, explain you what the resources of AAM are that you can go to in order to prepare you better for the work, so getting a job. You can share your questions in the chat box. We are monitoring them very carefully. And at the end of the first half hour of presentations, we will ask the questions directly to the speakers. And if there are any questions that you have about museumexpert.org, we will look at that as well, but we will handle them at the end of the session because now we want to focus on the topic of the conversation itself. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and asking Catherine McNamee to start the presentation. Welcome. Thanks again to museumexpert.org for this partnership and taking time today to share all these resources with the group. So please, Catherine, go ahead.
Real quick, Walter.
Yes.
I was going to share my screen.
Yes.
It says host disabled participant screen sharing. So just enable.
I've just enabled it. You
okay.
Can.
All right. Well, while we're getting the slides set up, I just want to say thank you to Walter for having Ryan and I here today. We're really excited to talk to you and share some what we hope will be helpful resources for you, as well as some really 5 action steps that might help you during a career transition. So I will kick it off. I'm in my home office in Alexandria, Virginia. So I imagine many of you are working and listening in remotely as well. I mentioned there's 5 sort of action steps that we thought might be helpful to take during a career transition. So I'll start with the first one. And, for people in the situation where they've been laid off or are in between jobs or maybe even looking to move into a different job, one of the first action steps I think that's helpful is to really take some time to reflect. If it's possible, allow yourself some time to really fully consider what you're looking for in your next position. It's really hard to do that when you're working. And so we don't typically do that on a day-to-day basis in our jobs. So it's definitely worth some time to think about what are the strengths that you have, what are your skills, what kind of work do you really enjoy doing, what are your passions. And I actually recommend literally doing a brainstorm list, writing it all down. What are my strengths, skills, and passions? And give yourself 20 minutes of unedited time.
Apply stuff. You always do that.
Hearing some background.
Yeah, please mute yourself if you're not a speaker. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Anyway, so one way you can kind of get started is just doing a brainstorm list of all those things. And as you're making that list, you'll start to see themes that jump out. You'll start to see some patterns that might help you decide what skills to lead with when you're updating your resume, or when you're creating your elevator speech, or updating social media profiles. I want to share just some prompts that you can ask yourselves to kind of get started. And we have a handout that we'll be sharing with Walter to distribute to everyone. So you don't have to write these questions I'm going to read down because they're in the handout, which we will share. But things to consider in this reflection period. What aspects of your work bring you the most satisfaction? What skills or attributes do you regularly receive compliments on from others? What tasks or responsibilities come easily to you? What makes your work experience unique? What's missing from your list? What are your growth opportunities? How do your strengths compare with the job requirements for the types of positions that you're looking for? And which of your skills might be transferable to different types of jobs, work environments, or industries? So all this is to say is that you really want to get a good understanding of what your narrative is going to be when you move into your new position. So what you want to be able to speak to, what were the lessons learned from your last position? How does that experience inform your next move? And if it's helpful, some people even just take it a step further and create like a one-page document that describes their target industry, possible organizations that they're interested in, and job titles. So that can help keep you focused. So that's the first piece, reflection. I'm going to hand it off to Ryan, who will talk about our next action step.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ryan Burke, Director of Membership at AAM. And I guess I should say good morning to some of you since we're kind of at the midday hour. I'm trying to advance, there we go. So what I'd like to talk to you about today, well, one of two things I'm going to talk to you about today is how you can take advantage of the resources that AAM makes available with regard to this subject. And one of the things you'll notice on these bullet points is that the vast majority of the resources that we currently offer on our site are in fact free, which I know cost is a consideration at this point for so many of us. So our blog, for example, we have a great content team at AAM, folks that have been in the industry for some of them for decades. And we've got a great blog that touches on all sorts of different topics. We do have a couple of titles that I'll share with you. And again, these will be in the resource that we provide to you afterwards. But just as three examples, we have one called Navigating a Job Search in the COVID Market. That would be a great article to read. Another one called Reinventing Museum Careers. And finally, a third one that actually I wrote shortly after coming on board at AAM in May last year, called Supporting Museum Professionals During a Time of Need. I know many of you are out of work right now, have been laid off or furloughed. I myself was laid off a couple of years ago, so I've been in your shoes. I know what it's like. I know some of the difficulties, but I also I share kind of my own experience because I think that there are lessons to be learned. So I'd encourage you to check out our blog posts because I think there's some great content there. Secondly, and perhaps most importantly, we have an entire section of our website dedicated towards career management resources. The AAM website, first of all, it's aam-us.org if you haven't been to it. Again, that's aam-us.org. And you'll see at the top of the website, there's some navigation. There's a navigation bar that should help you be able to find what you need. So there's one for membership. There's another one for, I think it's called Manage Your Career or something like that. You'll see it. But that's where the bulk of our career management resources are housed. So I encourage you to check that out. And among those resources are our Job HQ, which is basically our job board. And I encourage you to check that out to see, what job opportunities are currently posted. And then just as importantly, even if there are jobs that, may not be right for you, sometimes taking some time to read through job descriptions can be really helpful because it can help you identify the current skills that are in demand in the industry and give you an idea of maybe where you might need to brush up. Speaking of which, we do have resources on the website that you can also use to brush up on some of those skills, on some new skills. So I'd encourage you to take advantage of those as well. Finally, as the director of membership, it's kind of my job to explain why I believe that AAM membership is well worth the cost. Generally speaking, to become an individual member at AAM as a museum professional, it's $90 for 1 year of membership. And that includes a wealth of benefits. But what I'd like to highlight today for y'all is that for the last 6 months or so, we've been offering what we've just called our special membership. And it's essentially a 6-month version of our professional membership that we're offering for $25. So it's deeply discounted. You get everything else that you would get with a normal professional membership. The only difference is it's all digital. So, you're not going to get our great magazine in the mail, although you do still have access to it online. And you wouldn't get sent a membership card in the mail. We're basically just trying to keep costs low while still providing you with all the information and resources that you would need. Couple other things I do want to mention with regard to the membership. A fair amount of our resources on the site that are not career management resources are within our resource library. And that is members only resource library. So that would be something that you do need to have a membership in order to access those resources. Additionally, we have 20 what we call professional networks at AAM. And these are essentially a great way for folks within the field to network within the industry, focused on various topics. So just a couple of examples. We have one for young professionals. We have others that are more towards for curators. We have others that are more for educators. So all sorts of different professional networks that would be available to you to join as a member. I mentioned earlier our museum magazine. We also have 2 e-newsletters. One is called Aviso, which comes out weekly and is a fantastic resource for all museum professionals. And the other is Dispatches from the Future of Museums, which is written by our own Elizabeth Merritt. Elizabeth is a futurist, meaning that a lot of her work is focused on kind of looking into the future, trying to understand current trends and seeing where that's going to take us, with a focus on the museum field and education in general. So really a great read. And she does a wonderful job of curating content from across the web and putting that all within one weekly email, which is a great read. We also, as a member, you're entitled to discounts on professional development programs, other AAM publications, reports. And then finally, last but not least, our memberships provided discounted registration to our annual meeting and museum expo. Some of you may have attended our annual meeting and museum expo in the past. 2020 was the first year that we went all virtual, like many associations. We had to scramble to do it. It was an amazing feat. I can say that because I wasn't one of the people who actually did all the work. So I can brag on behalf of my colleagues, but they pulled everything together within just a couple of short weeks. And the good news is this year, it's going to be virtual again. There may be a small component in Chicago, but the key event is going to be virtual, and we've had months to prepare for it this year rather than just a few short weeks. So we're really excited about it. It's going to be phenomenal. Registration begins at the end of this month, so please be on the lookout. Check back on our website. And I would encourage you all to, even if you're not interested in membership at this point, be sure to register on our site. And just like I said, there's a lot of free resources. And if you register on our site, you're more likely to receive updates from us regarding things like the annual meeting and Museum Expo. And one of the reasons why I mentioned the annual meeting is because the thing that we've probably beefed up the most this year, or at least we're still working on it, but we're trying to make sure that we have lots and lots of networking opportunities for attendees. So if you're part of the conference, you're going to have access to an attendee list. There's going to be discussion boards, individual video chat, networking events, appointments with exhibitor companies. The list goes on. There's lots of ways to interact with folks across the industry. We're trying to make it as interactive of an event as possible. And also, I think by attending the conference, it's a great way for you, when you're interviewing with places. And, one of the questions that often comes up is, since you've, been out of work, how have you been keeping up? How have you been keeping your skills fresh? How have you been, making sure that you know what's going on? You're taking advantage of resources, you're networking. I think being able to talk about your experience with our annual event is a great way to kind of showcase that you're doing that. I'm going to turn it back over to Catherine now, who's going to talk a little bit about a little more about how you can boost your skills, and then she'll turn it back to me, and I'll talk a little bit more about online networking. So Catherine, you're up.
Thanks, Ryan. And I want to mention, I see some great questions in the chat. I think I'll just kind of run through my part, and Ryan, I guess we'll run through our parts, and we'll circle back to those questions at the end. I think we're gonna have a good discussion after the presentation piece. Another thing you can do, and a third step, so we've reflected, we're taking advantage of resources available to us. The third action step we can take is boosting our skills during a transition period. Ryan's covered a little bit about this already, but it really is important to stay current, with the museum field by monitoring hot topics, keeping up to date on current best practices and emerging trends. We're going to be sending you some links to the AAM's blog posts. So those are a great way to see what your colleagues are working on. And if you haven't gotten involved with Museum Junction, that's another way you can become involved. And you can actually post a question, help answer a question. So it's very interactive. We'll be sending you the link to how you can get involved and signed up on Museum Junction. AAM's website also does have some recorded webinars that are available to you. We're actually building that library up, so there will be more coming. So do check that out. We'll send you to the link to that as well. And I wanted to also mention, we have a great opportunity if anyone is interested in enhancing their advocacy and communication skills. Our museum's Advocacy Day is coming up in February. It's it's the first time it's going to be virtual for us, so it's be a little bit of a different experience, but it's a fantastic way to attend briefings and learn about the issues that are affecting funding for the arts and cultural institutions. And then, if you want to go on visits to your representatives, we'll get you trained up on how to effectively make your case. So I highly recommend that as a way to stay connected and, work on your advocacy skills as well. Ryan, I'll hand it back to you for some more on the networking piece.
Great. So I think most of you are probably already aware how important networking is when you're, when you're conducting a job search. I always stress that networking is important even when you are, employed, and even when you have a job that you love, like Catherine and I both do. It's always great to maintain those relationships, spend time on LinkedIn. I check LinkedIn every day, just like I do other social media sites, and I would encourage y'all to do the same. It's important that you maintain a positive and active digital identity. So I talked about activity, right? You want to be active, but you want to maintain a positive identity as well. Not just on LinkedIn, but on other social media sites you may be on as well. People can sleuth very well these days, and when you're looking for a job, folks may be trying to discover a little bit more about you, who you are, and how you interact with others online. So just a note of caution there. Make sure that your LinkedIn profile is up to date. There's, hopefully most of you know, but in case you don't, there is a feature on LinkedIn when you're updating your resume on LinkedIn, where you can basically set it so that online recruiters know that you're actively looking. And that can be a helpful way to make sure that folks are stumbling upon your resume while you're using LinkedIn to see what jobs are out there and to keep connected with folks in the community and in the industry. Catherine mentioned our Museum Junction earlier. One thing I do, so just to back up just a second, Museum Junction is essentially, it's almost like an online like message board, like think of like AOL from like the 1990s or something like that. It's kind of a very, very simple message board. It's not like a Facebook or anything like that, but you can post questions, you can see questions that other folks have answered, and a lot of folks find a ton of value in it. You don't have to be a member currently to participate in Museum Junction. So take advantage of it as long as you can. We highly encourage it. And then I talked about this earlier, but I can't stress enough the importance of networking, specifically within the museum industry, and even more specifically if there's a niche within the museum industry where all of your experience lies. You really want to make sure that you're talking to folks and understanding what opportunities might be available, what may be new since over the last several months. Obviously, the industry is quickly changing as we've gone through this pandemic and social unrest. So just make sure you use all the resources at your disposal to take advantage of that and to network with other folks online. I'm going to hand it back to Catherine. She's going to walk through kind of our last point, and then we'll start answering some questions.
Thanks, Ryan. So our last action step that we want to offer to you is to create a system of success for you during your job search period. So you want to make sure, what does that mean? You want to make sure that you set yourself up for success so that you don't get burned out, because it can be all consuming looking for, a new opportunity. So, we recommend setting reasonable goals for yourself. Dedicate a specific amount of time for job search activities. Some people have a hard time sitting down and actually, spending time on the job search activities, while others let it kind of consume them, and that's where all their time is spent. So you want to strike the right balance that makes the most sense for you. Again, set boundaries for yourself to avoid burnout, to kind of know, what energizes you, what kind of brings you down, and work around that. Maybe the time that you work on this, there are better times. And this is a little bit part of that reflection period too, you know, setting boundaries and knowing what motivates you as well, and letting those preferences work for you, right? So that you can shine. It also can be helpful to share your goals, challenges, and success with others. You know, kind of build a team around you to get a little emotional and mental support as you go through this process. I know some people have partnered up with job search buddies just to check in with each other for moral support and accountability. So that can be really helpful as well. And I wanted to mention our resource library does have several links around goal setting that might be useful to you. So again, we'll send that link out in the handout so you can take a look at that as well. So that is actually all the tips we have to offer. And I think we've hit on all the resources we wanted to make sure you were aware of. So I think we're ready for questions.
All right, we have a lot of really great questions that came in. First, Rachel Schwartzman asked, how do you reflect a COVID layoff on application materials so people know that you were laid off for COVID, not sort of overall job performance issues? And if job postings have a list of requirements of how are applications processed and how many requirements can you miss and still be considered? Are most applications processed electronically, or is it like an HR person looking over all applications?
Thanks, Kristen. I'll take a crack at that. Rachel, those are really good questions. I think regarding, you know, if you were laid off during this pandemic, you know, because of COVID, you know, it's absolutely fine to let employers know that's the reason why. In fact, and you know, the cover letter is a good place to kind of elaborate a little bit on any gaps of employment that you want to call out. So I think it's perfectly acceptable, you know, to mention that in a cover letter, because, you know, if you're listing the dates of employment, you know, it could raise questions. I think HR people in general, I think, are going to be a lot more forgiving. You know, I think we all, you know, have been impacted by, you know, the events of 2020. And I do think that, you know, people will be taking that into consideration. Regarding the question on job requirements and kind of how those are matched against resumes, you know, every museum seems to have its own process. You know, at AAM, we have a very manual process. I'm a one-person HR department, so I do all of the HR function. Recruitment is part of that. And it's a very manual function. So I'm, you know, it's all people reading resumes at AAM. So we don't have any kind of applicant tracking system that I think in some cases can, you know, kind of classify sometimes resumes based on some of the phrasing and the wording they're seeing in that. But it really does vary institution to institution. So there's really no like blanket statement I can say. You know, sometimes if you're asked to upload your documents, your application, you know, on the museum's website, that's, you know, that's a good indicator that they may be using some kind of software in the recruitment to help vet the candidates. I also wanted to say, I think you're absolutely right to be looking at those job qualifications and requirements very carefully. And that's the first place you probably want to go when you're looking at your resume and creating your cover letter for a position, because those are the factors that you're being evaluated on. However, I would still encourage you, even if you don't meet all of those qualifications, I would still encourage people to apply for positions where they feel, you know, very strongly about, they feel that they're suited for, and make sure you highlight as many of those skills that you do meet, the skills and qualifications that you do meet. You know, recruitment it's an art, not a science. You know, recruiting is tough because you're compared with the applicant pool that you're in. So you might be in an applicant pool where no one meets all of the qualifications, right? And as an HR person that has posted positions, you know, multiple times, sometimes you get lots of people meeting all the qualifications, and sometimes you struggle with that. So it's all relative to the applicant pool that you're in. So I definitely recommend pursuing those opportunities. Ryan, did you want to add anything?
Before that, Ryan, can you stop sharing your screen?
Yes, I will.
Thank you.
Yes, I'll just add two things real quickly. One, you asked about, you know, how do I broach the fact that I lost my job, you know, due to COVID. I completely agree with Catherine that I think a lot of HR professionals are going to recognize that that's most likely the case, that if you lost your job within, you know, the last year, it's probably COVID related, especially in our industry. But I do think that the cover letter is a fantastic opportunity for you to highlight something like that. Also, I'd like to stress personally that, you know, especially if you're applying to a smaller organization, sometimes that cover letter can really be key in terms of highlighting who you are. And you really want to try to focus on things that may not be apparent from your resume. What you don't want to do is just basically take bullet points from your resume and restate them in sentence form, because you're not really sharing anything new. And some HR professionals might even be a little upset that you've wasted their time. So try to highlight something, you know, distinct. If there's a particular project that you're proud of, that you didn't have an opportunity to expound upon in your resume, sometimes that's a great opportunity to do so in a cover letter. And then finally, the other thing I'll say is with regard to your resume, you know, if it's been a while since you've had to update it, you know, lean on some friends or colleagues or associates to take a look as well, and ask for their you know, a critical eye and tell them that you're not afraid of you know, suggestions, because sometimes, you know, folks may think of things that you may not have. They may, especially if they know you well. So be sure to lean on your friends and colleagues.
Right, another question that seems to be prevalent in a lot of the comments I'm reading are for recent graduates. How do you make up for like a lack of experience? How do you look at part-time jobs versus volunteer information on a resume as like HR or someone looking at these applications? Is that something you don't take as seriously as full-time employment?
Well, I can speak to, you know, AM and our practices. We're really putting an emphasis on skills over experience, and really demonstrated skills. So, and we've deliberately done that more in the last, I'd say, 4 years. I know sometimes traditional HR has, I think, put a lot of experience or a lot of weight on experience rather than experience and credentials instead of demonstrated experience. So, you know, that is something that we as an organization have shifted to make that weight a little more even. So that means that not all organizations, you know, each organization may weight something differently. But I think if you're very specific about the impact of, you know, your work, you know, results, if you can demonstrate the skills that they're talking about in the job posting, then that makes it very easy for a hiring manager to have a specific example of how you utilized and applied a particular skill. And I think anytime, you know, a hiring manager sees that, that's going to jump out rather than just like a, you know, number of years experience.
I don't have too much to add to that, but I guess somewhat relatedly, one thing I didn't mention earlier when I was talking about networking is don't be afraid to ask people for informational interviews. And you don't even need to call it an informational interview. Just reaching out to people and asking for their time. I think some people would be surprised at how willing people are to share their time, especially if they know that you're younger or earlier in your career and you're trying to find a way to break in. Earlier in my career, I was in a different kind of niche industry in sports marketing, and so much of it is trying to get your foot in the door by just making connections and talking to people. So I can't stress that enough. Don't be afraid. The worst someone can do is just not respond to you, and you just move on to the next one.
Along those lines, I think Alex and Alan posed a question earlier is, how do you recommend maintaining a positive and active digital identity for someone who doesn't post on social media often?
That's a great question. I'll take a stab at this one first, Catherine, and you can think while I'm talking. I personally have struggled in the past on LinkedIn, for example. I see people posting things I used to see people posting things all the time, and I thought to myself, well, I don't know what to post. I find one thing is, sharing other things that you found, just making sure that you're keeping up with the industry. Like I said, keep coming to AAM, keep coming to our website, keep coming to other associations' websites. Find that content and share it. That's kind of the advice that I would offer is, I think that can at least get you comfortable in that space. And then before you know it, you'll have more and more that you'll want to talk about. Catherine, any additional thoughts?
Yeah, I was kind of thinking along the same lines as you, Ryan. I'm not, particularly active or engaged online, ironically, right? But I think there's some things that you can do. I think at a very basic level, people should, before a job search, Google yourself, right? What does your name come up? What's attached to it? What kind of pictures are there out there, of you, and do it through the mindset of a potential employer, right? So that's just a good exercise. And then I think, ask yourself, what do you think you need to do to kind of maintain a professional presence, right? So is your name out there? What, do people know what industry you're in? What kind of work you can do? Are you comfortable with highlighting some of your work skills online? So even, LinkedIn, you can highlight that without, necessarily posting articles or writing blog posts or things like that. So there is a lot I think you can do just from a very basic level. And, is it professional? Can people get in touch with you, if they wanted to? So you might think about that. And then it's up to you, I think, the level to which you want to engage. But yeah, Ryan, I think that's a great idea. Just even reposting, professional articles definitely is a way to start to get engaged.
One other quick thought I had, and some of y'all may do this as well, but when I was conducting my job search, obviously, you'll hear folks say that, when you're applying for a job, you want to make sure that you do some research on the company or the museum or the institution, which is all true. Do some research on folks that work there too. If you know who you're going to be interviewing with, make sure you can learn a little bit about them and try to reference what you've learned a little bit in that conversation. Most people like to talk about themselves. So if you can open up the conversation to that, it's always a way to kind of make a little bit of a connection and show that you've you've taken the time to learn a little bit about them, and it's not just all about you.
We have a great question from Cameron Reed, who is our neighbor to the north. He wants to know how applicable is this advice and AAM resources to Canadian museum workers, or I want to expand this to maybe museum workers in other countries as well.
I'll just respond quickly by saying I don't have any particular expertise to answer this question. But I do know that we at AAM, we do have members in Canada, primarily in Canada, internationally. We have members across the world, but Canada would be our number one in terms of members. We have quite a few actually, and quite a few museums in Canada as well. And I think I don't know of any reason why what we've shared today wouldn't be applicable in Canada or elsewhere.
Great. We also have a couple questions about what do you do to follow up with HR? Once you've submitted your resume, or if you had an interview, what's appropriate? Do you make a phone call to thank them? Do you send an email? As a Department of One, Catherine, what's your preference there?
Well, it's always good to ask if you are in a conversation, about a job, whether it's with the hiring manager or human resources. Put that on your list of things to ask. What the next steps may be. When might I hear from you again? When would it be okay to contact you? I think it's totally appropriate. I'm fine when people check in after an interview, just to say, a thank you's always nice. Some people are still doing handwritten thank you notes, which is really great. Maybe not so much in the virtual environment. We've actually had a couple of virtual hires, including Ryan. So, electronic thank yous are fine as well. But you've got to respect the process that the institution has and the hiring team. So I think a little note to let you know, to let the hiring team know you're still interested in the position, and to offer to provide any additional information is always welcome. It might be too much to expect additional engagement from that hiring team before they're ready, to make their decision. But I think it's totally appropriate to just check in, expressing your interest, your continued interest in a position.
Yeah, I'll add a couple things real quickly. I think I don't know if it's always 100% necessary to follow up on every conversation that you have throughout the process. I personally would. Anyone that you speak to, I think it's worth making sure you've got their email and following up with a quick email, thanking them for their time. First of all, everyone's obviously very busy. Most places right now, they're not staffed appropriately, so everyone's a little bit overworked. So thank them for their time. And then I think it's important to reference something that you discussed during your conversation, so that it's clear to them that you're not just copying and pasting what you would send to anyone. I think that's key. The second thing that I would stress, and I learned from experience the last time I was looking for a job, and I've not shared this broadly, so consider yourselves lucky as I embarrass myself here. Recognize that people are not always going to stick to the timeline that they've shared with you. So if someone tells you that they'll be back in touch with you within, by the end of the week, and you don't hear from them, don't assume that it's because they're ghosting you. Sometimes they are, and that happened to me on a number of occasions. Even after having a great conversation, you just don't hear back for whatever reason. But I made the mistake once, after several experiences in a row of having been ghosted, you know, I sent a note to someone and told them that I really didn't appreciate the fact that they just left me hanging. And that was an incorrect assumption that I had. And it did not work out well. I would say it did not work out well for me in that I didn't get a job offer, but it actually did work out well for me because I ended up finding a place that I'm very happy to work, and I think much happier than I would have been at the other place. But live and learn. Everyone makes mistakes, but just recognize that timeline can move and change, and don't be afraid to check back in, but don't assume that you know something that you don't know.
All right, we've got also a couple questions here about skills. What sort of skills are desirable or hireable for someone when you're looking at a resume? Does it have to be exactly matching to what the job description is, or could it be other skills as well? And also, a lot of museums have very specific, like marketing systems or point of sales or ticketing systems. How do you show that you know how to use one, but also you think that that skill could be transferable to learning like another system if that's not the one the museum uses?
That's a great question. And you can, you know, I don't know if that's going to be the deal breaker, like in that example, you know, if someone uses Razor's Edge or not. But if it's important enough that you feel you need to elaborate on that, you could talk about, well, you know, I've used fundraising, you know, software, and I taught it to myself, or, you know, I received training on it, and you can, you know, list what the name is, you know, of the software. So you can explain it more maybe in a cover letter. So like any skills maybe that you want to elaborate on, you could highlight in your cover letter, and, you know, maybe stress the versatility that, you know, you have, or, you know, emphasize that you've become an expert in this particular software or whatever the skill is. In terms of, I mean, you really want to, if a job description is saying you've got to have strong communication skills, strong writing skills, you really have to address it in the way the employer is asking for it. But, you know, maybe you haven't done the kind of, I don't know, writing that one might find in a museum, but, you know, speak to other similar forms of writing that you have done, even if it is not in the exact same context. You know, the more you can explain that, I think it helps suss that out. And again, that's a good place. The cover letter can be a good place for that. An interview, you know, if you get a telephone interview or a Zoom video chat like that, those are the places where you can elaborate a little bit more on those skills. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add is, you know, it depends. A lot of times you can kind of determine how important it is based on the job description. You know, if it says, like, in big, bold, all caps, must have 5 years of XYZ technical experience, and you've never even heard of the platform, it's probably not the right job for you. But a lot of times, you know, if it's not worded that strongly, don't assume that they're going to be able to find a candidate that has exactly what they've asked for, and don't assume that the strongest candidate is going to be the person with the strongest technical skills. You know, for the job that I have now that I applied for, one of the things that was included on the job description was experience with a CRM system called Aptify, which is what we use at AAM in order to, you know, manage our membership and all sorts of different things. I'd never heard of Aptify, quite frankly, but I'd had, you know, some other experience with other CRM systems, and also, you know, could speak to how I'd been able to quickly learn and develop new skills, you know, in other jobs. So, you know, if you do get the interview, make sure that you have a good way to speak to why you believe that you're still a great candidate for the role, despite not having, maybe you're not the strongest in technical skills. The last thing I'll just mention is whatever you do, don't lie. Don't tell them that you have a skill that you don't have. Just be confident that that you'll be able to develop it, and that you're a quick learner, and that you can demonstrate that quickly.
This is a good question that just came in from Amber. Is in this environment, is it a good idea to just snag whatever position we can, including part-time and volunteer, with organizations we'd like to work with? Or do you anticipate that there will be less opportunity for advancement given how the applicant pool will be so competitive for the immediate future?
It's a great question. I'm gonna let Catherine take the first stab.
Thank you, I think. That's an interesting one. I mean, I think it is highly personal. Do you have the resources to maybe hold out for, something that's closer to what you ultimately want to be doing? Amber, your question mentions, taking a part-time or temporary job, maybe with an organization that you're interested in. To me, that gives it a little more weight. Not knowing anything else about your situation, that intrigued me. And I would say, if there's an organization you've been watching, I'm guessing you probably know a lot of, about the organization. Maybe you've been following them, on social media, been to their website, maybe even know some employees that work there. These are the best ways to really kind of find out what workplace culture is like, what the organization stands for. And so it intrigues me, your question, because I think there's something to that. You're probably monitoring their job postings as well. And so maybe you even have an idea of how often positions come open.
Well, I was going to say, so when you're looking at museum education positions, so there's oftentimes summer camp, we'll see, right? Or, scrambling to do these virtual and engage in the community in the ways that you can, and turning your school programs into whatever they need to be through this pandemic time. So for museum ed, a lot of times there are these counselor positions or summer camp positions, or, those kinds of program opportunities that you can get involved in. I want to work in museum ed. I want to make programming. I want to drive that engine, right? That's where my passion is. Summer camp is fun, but
sure.
So that's the question: is it worthwhile to be there now, or are there just going to be so many great candidates later that that's what you should focus on? And that's where I'm not sure where to be.
I think it's partially finding a balance between, are you truly, if you really ask yourself, are you going to gain any, satisfaction from one of these positions? Like, can you do a good job, and just, make a good faith effort, even though it's not exactly what you want to do? But I would also look at the factors. Will this temporary or part-time position maybe expose you to more of the organization, right? And will it give you further insight into the organization? Because it could be a great way to sort of test the waters and see if from that experience, maybe you'll come out of it with a different perception of the organization. And, you're like, oh, maybe I don't want to work here. There are other institutions that have opportunities. So I think it's just kind of having that balance, finding that balance. Ryan, do you have any advice for us?
Well, I'm not sure I have a ton of advice on Amber's specific question, but there was a related question, very related question that came up that I just saw. that asked, I'm struggling with how much of a pay cut to take. Any advice there? That was from Sarah. It's, again, you know, as Catherine kind of started, you know, her answer with that's, you know, it's personal. Everyone's situation is different, but I do have some experience with that on my own. I went from working for a very large nonprofit that of 2,000 or more employees that actually was more like a for-profit based on their business model. And they are known for paying very well, and I was paid very well for what I did. And, you know, moving to a different industry and a much smaller organization, it was something that I had to be open to. And I was open to it because my family circumstances are such, you know, my wife works, and it was something that we were able to do. But I think the most important thing is to understand, to really understand your own situation financially, and to know what you can afford to do. Because the last thing you want to do is, you know, take a job that's, you're not going to be able to pay your bills. But if I will say, from my own experience, if it's the right place and the right job and it requires you to take a pay cut, I would do it 100% of the time. That's me personally. Just because, you know, to me, you know, money isn't everything. And I think in the long run, if you're happy working where you are, and if you're doing good work, you'll eventually make it back. You'll make up that difference.
Hi, this is Walter. Thank you. We are 5 minutes away or less from the 1 hour that we had reserved for this. And I first want to do, and before I forget, to thank Catherine and you, Ryan, for this very interesting presentation, and all participants for the very lively conversations, interesting questions that they have asked. We have not lost one person during the whole session. So that speaks to the quality of what has been said and heard, and the conversation that has been going on. So I'm really happy that we have been able to provide that. And at the same time, I recognize that we have so many more that we need to go over. When I see the questions that are still coming in, it is really a very, very timely conversation. And so we, with Museum Expert, over the next weeks, we are going to try to respond to that. And in February, we have at least 2 sessions. And the first one is going to be more on things that you have touched upon, is very directly about your resume. How are you going to write your resume to make sure that you are the most competitive in the field and under the circumstances that are there? So that's one. And then we will have a happy hour where we will actually listen to everybody with no agenda. Everybody can come in and have a conversation and really exchange experiences on that. But after that, and this is also a little bouncing back of things that you have been saying, is that we want to provide the people that are member of Museum Expert and beyond with what's to stay current. We want them to stay current. Things that Catherine has been saying. What are the current practices? What are the trends that's seen? Because we want the people that are members of Museum Expert stay current, and that they know when they apply to jobs, that they know what these practices are and what the trends are, and so that they are well weaponed for being competitive. So these are other. And so if there's any topic that anyone here who is listening is thinking of, please let us know. We're very happy to respond to initiatives and ideas that you have. Other things is that we are looking to improve the work of our organization. And one of the things that I can share with you, and that we will see in the next weeks, is providing the stories of people. And Eric Havel, who is a member of my team, has mentioned it in the chat. You can go back to that. We already did a number of interviews with people that are out of work and who tell the stories. Oh, did they navigate this situation? What are they trying to do? What are the new things that they are trying, etc. And so you will see, starting in a week or 10 days or so, you will see a carousel on the website where we see all these stories coming up. And so we're very happy. So there is a place on the website in your profile, if you go back in there, that you can click and say, I'm happy to share my story. And so we will then look at you and invite you for a short interview. It's very short, but it's really good examples of how people are navigating the actual situation. So there are many other things in the pipeline. And so someone asking, is it good to volunteer? Yes, you can volunteer with museumexpert.org. You can do that. And so please let us know. We have so many things that are, and we are all volunteers, and so many things on our table that we want to respond to, that everybody is welcome. So please do contact us and make sure that you share your ideas on how we can be better, and ideas of things, topics that you want us to tackle. And we're very happy to respond to that. Thanks to AAM for this incredible partnership. We have partnerships with other organizations, and we are negotiating with them similar type of organizations and webinars. So if Tamara Schwartz, who is also a member of my team, or Eric Havel, who are listening here, have anything to say right now, just please go ahead and do so.
No, I think it's really good. Thank you to Catherine and Ryan and amplifying the idea of during COVID, there's nothing to feel shameful or bad about. We've all been through it in one way or another. And I think telling those stories, how you did that reflection process, I think to me is a really valuable story that I'm hoping Museum X will highlight in some of these, kind of quick bios and summaries. And it really shows that each of us has had a chance, for better or worse, to really step back, think about where we want to go, take that passion and interest, use COVID as a stepping stone, a learning tool. We've all had to pivot to this virtual platforms. So I think that's all ripe for putting into your story. As Ryan mentioned, don't repeat in your resume what you say in the cover letter, emphasizing some of those personal stories. One of the things for me was I ended up pivoting and taking care of my 99-year-old grandfather for 8 months before he passed away. So it was a real unique opportunity for me to get to know him personally. And that's very, that's personal. So I don't know if that's appropriate in a resume or cover letter, but it changed me, right? It was very valuable. So, and I also realized that like environmental education and climate change are huge areas of focus for me. And I was doing some of that work, but now I have an opportunity to really grow that. So where do you want to go? And we're coming into a new period in time. We're reopening, we're forward thinking. Things are changing in our country. So use all of that and forward think and be positive, as Ryan mentioned. It'll just set you up for success, I think.
Okay, Tamara, do you have anything to add?
Just one question that has come up a couple times is that people are asking, what is the best contact info for Museum Expert? And so Walter, if you want to share an email address in the chat, that might be good. I'm not sure if we actually have a general email an info at email address, but if not,
you should be able to contact us through the website actually on the profiles.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for anybody who may not be registered yet for museumexpert.org, that's how you can get on our mailing list and receive our e-newsletters announcing upcoming events. So thank you all for joining.
Thanks again. Thanks to AAM. Thanks to Catherine and Ryan and to all of you. Maybe we'll see you next month. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Walter and Eric and Tamara for having us. And thanks for your great questions, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.